Jack could send me anywhere as long as my bishop consented, and I would go. I have so much love for Jack. When Jack first rolled me out on this circuit a few years ago, he introduced me. He said, Father Schenck is a priest of the Diocese of Harrisburg, where he directs Respect Life, chairman of the National Pro-Life Center on Capitol Hill in Washington, and Father has 9 children. Please welcome Father Schenck. And then the next time, he said something very similar. Father Schenck, involved in pro-life work at 3 places, Harrisburg, he's a priest of the diocese. He has 9 children, please welcome. Finally, I took him aside and I said, Jack, if you're going to tell them that the priest has 9 children, tell them he has a wife. So now, he mentions Becky. We celebrate 36 years of marriage in March. We married one another the year we turned 19. And so college, graduate school, seminary. By the time I was finished with my academic work, we had 6 children. But we didn't have a car. We didn't. We didn't have a car. We lived in a very Spartan apartment, 2 rooms above a garage that didn't have sufficient heat in the winter, so we would go to either her parents' house or my parents' house in the winter. We were poor, but so fulfilled, because our home, our married life, our children were our treasure. Our treasure. And we have to return in our culture, in our communities, in our time, to treasuring the life God gives to us, our own lives, our lives together, in the bonds of holy matrimony, the lives of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and nephews and nieces and grandnephews and grandnieces. All this glorious life, and celebrate that life and embrace that life and champion that life and exult in that life. And trade away our 3rd cars and our boats and all this stuff. Last evening I interviewed 10 of our young people being confirmed. And next Wednesday night, 10 more. So last evening I told them in the course of our interview, I said, it's so easy for us to fall away from the faith, because the world is filled with temptations, with distractions, and stuff. Lots of stuff. Stuff. Just stuff everywhere. It's offering us shiny stuff. And stuff that beeps. And stuff that has lights in it. And stuff we can listen to, and stuff we can watch. All this stuff. And we just get so excited about stuff. We want more stuff, like iPhones and iPads and smart cars. We want all the stuff we can get. Then all we have to do is just walk through the junkyard. Just walk through the junkyard. In fact, it struck me that I think we should have an annual parish pilgrimage to the junkyard. I think we should walk through the junkyard reflecting. And what do we see there? All that stuff, rusting, falling apart, rotting. It's junk. It's junk. You know, we need now to recapture, re-embrace that great sublime gift. That gift that begins when we begin, the life given to each one of us, the lives that we have the privilege of cooperating and co-creating. You know, with God, new life, and that life continues on into eternity. And we trade it for stuff that soon becomes junk. It's a tragedy of our time, and we need to recover. That's not the topic tonight. That was a freebie. So I proposed to Jack that I talk about Pope Francis and Catholic social teaching, which has become all the rage. Can you imagine that? It's all the rage, Catholic social teaching, and the sanctity of human life. So I was preparing to get on an Amtrak to New York. The Supreme Court Society was having their annual dinner in Manhattan, and I was going. And there was a whole stir going on, listening on the radio, watching the chimney in Rome, waiting for the white smoke to rise, and I was making my way to the train station, parking the car, listening intently to the radio, waiting. I'm going to get on a train here this afternoon, and I'm going to be incommunicado for a couple of hours, so come on already, we need to get that smoke rising, and I got to learn this before, well, something happened and I missed my train. So I'm waiting for the next train, and I said, well, I'm running out of time, I've got to get the next train, turn off the car, get my bags out, and I'm just about to walk into the train station, my phone is ringing, so I answer the phone, it's my brother. My identical twin brother, Reverend Paul Schenck, is chairman of the Evangelical Church Alliance in America, and he's chairman of the Ten Commandments Project in Washington, Faith and Action Mission at the Supreme Court. And he's calling. It's my brother. I answer the phone, and he says, well, what do you think? And I said, about what? He said, about the Pope. I said, what Pope? He said, we have a Pope. My brother, the evangelical minister, for a little while. And he says, we have a Pope. And I said, I haven't heard. He said, well, turn on the radio. Well, now the train's about to pull into station, so I'm grabbing my bags, and I don't even know who our Pope is. And I'm getting into the train station, and I just get onto the train, and I've got my collar beaming out as I'm walking down the aisle in the car, and I plop myself down, and when I plop myself down, I am not exaggerating, a line begins to form. People start lining up. What about the Pope? Tell us about the Pope. It got so frenetic. I had people sitting down next to me telling me their life stories. I'm not Catholic, I was raised Baptist, I want to hear all about this. Tell me, how is the Pope elected? What does the Pope do? Who is the Pope? All this excitement, the car is just energized. I am not exaggerating. What they wound up doing was they had the conductors stationed at the front of the car and the back of the car directing traffic into me. Just like a church usher would. You hold here, when he's finished, okay, we send the next one. The entire 2-hour train trip. Non-stop. And it gave me, I was talking to Jews, to Methodists, to Presbyterians, to Baptists, and when it was finally, we're just finishing up, and I'm talking all about the successor of Peter and the keys. It was magnificent. It was just a marvelous experience. And I'm telling them all about the Holy Father and the church. And finally, when it was calming down and we're pulling into the station, the conductors decided, okay, enough already. We've been directing people. Now it's our turn, and they come down and sit down and talk to me about the Pope. The Pope arrests the attention of the world. Time magazine, as you know, chose him as their person of the year. And I went looking for this, and I went into the store, and I found the last copy, very last copy on the shelf. And the clerk, young girl, 20 maybe years old, and she had quite a few tattoos and piercings. And I bought the last edition of Rolling Stone magazine, and I put it down on the counter, and I said, he's cool, isn't he? And I said, he's my new boss. And she went, really? It's like, wow, I'm that close to a celebrity? The guy here, the guy who's buying this from me works for him? These are great days to be Catholic. Great days to be Catholics. Or near Catholics, as the case may be. Now, Pope Francis, just by virtue of the fact of being chosen as successor to Peter, arrested the attention of the world. And then, certain things that he said in response to questions and inquiry, all legitimate inquiry, legitimate questions, further excited the media world and increased the curiosity of the curious. All God's doing. Stirring it up. Raising the important questions. Putting things considered settled into the column of unsettled. And that's good. That's a good place. For questions to be raised, issues to be explored, and the Vicar of Jesus Christ right at the center of it all. Just when we thought that religion was on the wane, being ignored or being pushed out of the room, all of a sudden, the center of it all turns out to be the center of all this. And it hasn't stopped. It hasn't died down. When CNN covers the Pope every day, you know something is happening. And it's all the Lord's doing. So let's get to it then. Time magazine's choice of Pope Francis as Person of the Year capped this astoundingly positive media coverage of the selection of the new pontiff. The notorious NARO, the National Association for Reproductive Rights, published an ad. It was a display ad in a number of prominent magazines and newspapers, among them the New Yorker, that simply said, "Thank you, Pope Francis, pro-choice women everywhere." And the pundits were wondering aloud if we finally had a pope that would update morality and approve of abortion. It makes you wonder how much research, if any, is done in the 24-hour news cycle. Here, for instance, is Pope Francis in June of last year. Quote, "All too often, as we know from experience, people do not choose life. They do not accept the gospel of life, but let themselves be led by ideologies and ways of thinking that block life, that do not respect life, because they are dictated by selfishness, self-interest, profit, power, and pleasure, and not by love, by concern for the good of others. It is the eternal dream of wanting to build the city of man without God, without God's life and love, a new Tower of Babel. It is the idea that rejecting God, the message of Christ, the gospel of life, will somehow lead to freedom, to complete human fulfillment. As a result, the living God is replaced by fleeting human idols which offer the intoxication of a flash of freedom, but in the end brings new forms of slavery and death." That's pretty powerful stuff. I'm not sure that Nero was in church that day. Now the Pope, a Jesuit, is suspected by some of being soft on life issues and hard on Catholic social teaching, which is now all the rage. Because after all, Catholic social teaching, that's the doctrine of the left in the Catholic Church, whereas Blessed John Paul, Benedict, the gospel of life, that's the right of the church. That's in the world of the 24-hour news cycle, where everything is left or right. So Catholic social teaching is critical to the interpretation of Pope Francis to the world. Why is this? Because there's a fascination now with Catholic social teaching. There's a sense that somehow there's this secret code in the Catholic Church that if it were only revealed, then we would all shift over and we would endorse MSNBC. You know, CST, MSNBC, they sort of rhyme. Catholic social teaching, MSNBC, you know, kind of like somehow one connects to the other. This is only in the backward, upside down, inside out world of the 24-hour news cycle. But it's critical that we understand Catholic social teaching because Pope Francis, of course, is the single most authoritative teacher of Catholic social teaching. He himself is a great proponent of Catholic social teaching, and the world is waiting to see what he does with it. So I think it's important for us to understand him in the context of Catholic social teaching. If you're not familiar with it, the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church is the place where all this is really brought together in a comprehensible way. It's the encyclopedia of Catholic social teaching. And it's widely available, even on the internet. It's a substantial sized book, so I'm not saying that it's something that you're going to read in one sitting in an evening, but it is a great reference tool. So we're going to look at the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church to explore Pope Francis in the context of Catholic social teaching. So Catholic social teaching is founded on certain permanent principles the compendium speaks of. The first of which is the dignity of the human person, which it says is the foundation of all other principles and content of the Church's social doctrine. Just to give you an idea here of how this is understood by the media. I lost my page. Give me just a moment to get it back again. I want to read to you something from the Time Magazine article to refresh your memory, because I know you all subscribe to Time Magazine. Let me see here, just a moment. Here it is. What makes this Pope so important is the speed with which he has captured the imagination of millions who had given up on hoping for the Church at all. People weary of the endless parsing of sexual ethics, the buck-passing infighting over lines of authority, when all the while, to borrow from Milton, the hungry sheep are looking up and are not fed. In a matter of months, Francis has elevated the healing mission of the Church as servant and comforter of hurting people in an often harsh world, above the doctrinal police work so important to his predecessors. Francis is a former janitor, nightclub bouncer, chemical technician, and literature teacher. So the world is seeing Francis in the context of this social doctrine. So let's explore it even further. The Church's social doctrine stops to dwell above all on the principal and indispensable dimensions of the human person. Number 24 in the compendium. So, to understand the Church's teaching on human society and social issues, which is now such a curiosity in the 24-hour news cycle as well as in the chattering classes, it's necessary and fundamental to discover what it teaches about the human person and human rights, which is the very foundation of what Pope Francis is announcing and alerting both the Church and the world to. The compendium asserts the roots of human rights are to be found in the dignity that belongs to each human being. The ultimate source of human rights is not found in the mere will of human beings, in the reality of the state, in public powers, but in man himself and in God, his creator. These rights are universal, inviolable, inalienable. It's pretty firm stuff. Now the compendium goes on to specify that, quote, the first right presented in this list is the right to life, from conception to its natural end. And furthermore, it states that an integral part of the right to life is the right of the child to develop in the mother's womb from the moment of conception. This is Pope Francis' constitution right here. So we have to listen very carefully, and we have to be ready to reference this, to be able to communicate it, to be able to paraphrase it. So let's continue to listen. Now, abortion, the willful taking of an unborn child's life, is, according to the compendium, listen, is, let me look here, just a moment, a horrendous crime and constitutes a particularly serious moral disorder. Far from being a right, it is a sad phenomenon that contributes seriously to the spreading of a mentality against life, representing a dangerous threat to a just and democratic social coexistence. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm getting excited that people are interested in this. Very interested, very curious about this. Let's get this out. Pope Francis is giving us the platform to do it. Let's get this Catholic social teaching out there. So we see then that Catholic social teaching starts with the universal, inviolable, inalienable right to life, and that right begins at conception when both reason and revelation tell us that a new human being begins. In his recent apostolic exhortation, Pope Francis writes, "The defense of unborn life is closely linked to the defense of each and every other human right. It involves the conviction that a human being," I'm still quoting Pope Francis, "is always sacred and inviolable in any situation and at every stage of development. Human beings are ends in themselves and never a means of resolving other problems. Once this conviction disappears, so do solid and lasting foundations for the defense of human rights, which would always be subject to the passing whims of the powers that be." That, in and of itself. Oh, if we could commit that quote to memory. And when somebody says, "Yeah, tell me about this Pope of yours," quote him here. Be very powerful, transformational, really. So Catholic social teaching tells us the relationship with God requires that the life of man be considered sacred and inviolable. That is, never to be broken, infringed upon, dishonored, or violated. The fifth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," has validity because God alone is Lord of life and death. The respect owed to the inviolability and integrity of physical life finds its climax in the positive commandment, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself," by which Jesus enjoins the obligation to tend to the needs of one's neighbor. This is all echoing what Pope Francis has been saying, only he's saying it in an eminently pastoral manner. And he's communicating it with real, true, sincere empathy and sympathy. Just exudes that love which is irresistible. He's irresistible. And that's a beautiful moment for us. The compendium invokes Vatican II, and in particular the document Gaudium et Spes, which presents in a systematic manner the themes of culture, of economic and social life. This is what Pope Francis has been talking about, of marriage and of the family, of the political community, of peace and of the community of peoples. This is stuff that excites MSNBC. In the light of a Christian anthropological outlook and of the Church's mission, and this is what Pope Francis has been talking about. He's been talking about the mission of the Church. The mission of the Church to the poor, the mission of the Church to the marginalized, the mission of the Church to those who have been ignored, to the hungry, to the homeless, and so on. Everything is considered from the starting point of the person and with a view to the person, the only creature that God willed for its own sake. Society, then, its structures and development must be oriented toward the progress of the human person. So when we talk about the progress of the human person, that progress begins when the human person begins. When the human person begins moving forward. And that begins at conception. So the whole fabric of social responsibility as regards human and civil rights, care for the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, issues of justice and peace, is all tied together with this principal idea of the dignity of all persons and of the inviolability of human life. Catholic social teaching insists that a society that cares for its weaker members, including the poor and the needy, must be founded upon love. A community has solid, and I'm quoting the compendium, the community has solid foundations when it tends toward the integral promotion of the person and of the common good. In such cases, law is defined, respected, and lived according to the manner of solidarity and dedication towards one's neighbor. Justice requires that everyone should be able to enjoy their own goods and rights, This can be considered the minimum measure of love. Social life becomes more human the more it is characterized by efforts to bring about a more mature awareness of the ideal towards which it should be oriented, which is a civilization of love. And the centerpiece of that civilization of love, says Catholic social teaching, is the family. The first cell of the civilization of love. And that society only begins with the family, which is presented in Catholic social teaching as the sanctuary of life. I think it's such a beautiful phrase. The family as the sanctuary of life. The dignity of the human being, called to proclaim the goodness and fruitfulness that come from God, is eminently revealed in the task of procreation. Human fatherhood and motherhood, while remaining biologically similar to that of other living beings in nature, contain in an essential and unique way a likeness to God, which is the basis of the family as a community of human life, as a community of persons united in love. Such a beautiful description of the family. You know, when I was a law school chaplain, I sat on the committee for incoming law students, and I was part of the interview group. And we had a young man, a father, he was in his early 30s, they had 5 children, he was an engineer, and he wanted to come to law school, and it came to my turn, and I said to him, I said, well, can you tell us, the interviewing committee, I said, can you tell us, you know, I said, you're a married man, you have 5 young children, you've been an engineer, why is it that you want to become a lawyer? Why do you want to come to law school? And he said, well, he said, my wife and I, all we've really done is be married and have kids, and I wanted to do something important with my life. And I said, oh, let's stop right there, and let's work backward. I said, what you and your wife have done is you have made a gift to one another of your lives, an incomparable gift. You've returned your lives together as a gift to God, and with God you have cooperated and co-created new human beings. You have formed their personalities. You have educated them and prepared them as gifts given to the world. That sounds pretty important to me. I said, in fact, that sounds like what God does. And he said, oh, I never thought about it that way. Now, he went on to become a lawyer, but I do hope with a new perspective. The social subjectivity of the family, both as a single unit and associated in a group, is expressed as well in the demonstration of solidarity and sharing, not only among families themselves, but also in various forms of participation in social and political life. So look at that. Catholic social teaching says that politics begins with the family. The reference point of the family. You learn how to be political. You learn how to be responsible. You learn how to be a citizen in the family. That's where you learn. And that's the beauty of this social teaching. Politics is not divorced from family life. It's born in family life. Good politics is politics that arises out of the love that binds a family together. So the family has its foundation in the free choice of the spouses to unite themselves in marriage in respect for the meaning and value of this institution that does not depend on man, but on God. The family is, according to Catholic social teaching, an institution born, even in the eyes of society, from the human act by which the partners mutually surrender themselves to each other, and is founded on the very nature of the conjugal love, which as a total and exclusive gift of person to person entails a definitive commitment expressed by mutual, irrevocable, and public consent. Imagine if Congress were to pass a resolution that expressed politics just like that, defined the state in that way. That would be truly transformational. Pope Francis, in a conversation with a Maltese bishop, reaffirmed what he had said as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, that same-sex marriage is an anthropological regression. That's what he called it. In a conversation with Rabbi Avraham Skorka, published in a book On Heaven and Earth, Francis said same-sex marriage is a weakening of the institution of marriage. That has existed for thousands of years and is forged according to nature and anthropology, the very nature of the human person, of the human being. So Catholic social teaching emphasizes that no power can abolish the natural right to marriage or modify its traits and purposes. Marriage, in fact, is endowed with its own proper, innate, and permanent characteristics. In its objective truth, marriage is ordered to the procreation and education of children. And so, according to Catholic social teaching, how incongruous is the demand to accord marital status to unions between persons of the same sex? It is opposed, first of all, by the objective impossibility of making the partnership fruitful through the transmission of life, according to the plan inscribed by God in the very structure of the human being. Another obstacle is the absence of the conditions for that interpersonal complementarity between male and female, willed by the Creator at both the physical, biological, and the eminently psychological levels. It is only in the union of two sexually different persons that the individual can achieve perfection in a synthesis of unity and mutual psychophysical completion. There's the definition of marriage that Pope Francis ascribes to in Catholic social teaching. Now, still, homosexual persons are to be fully respected in their human dignity. And this again, remember when Pope Francis said, "Who am I to judge?" You take that in the whole context. If you read the context of that statement, it's a beautiful statement that is founded in Catholic social teaching. Homosexual persons are to be fully respected in their human dignity and never disrespected. See? So Pope Francis was speaking directly from the teaching of the Church. It wasn't an offhanded, ill-considered, or unconsidered remark. It was strategic, because it gave rise to an aspect of Catholic social teaching which is the teaching of the Church, the disposition of the Church toward homosexual persons that the world didn't understand, didn't know about. The world just simply didn't. The world thought, well, if you're really a faithful Catholic, then you hate gay people, right? Doesn't that mean, if you're going to be a mass-going Catholic that fasts during Lent, then you're going to hate gay people. Isn't that what we hear at CNN and other places? Sure. And in one phrase, Pope Francis dispelled all of that and brought it right back to the authoritative teachings of the Church. So, the social teaching then begins with the sanctity of human life in the womb, the right to be born, and therefore to enjoy all other human rights. It addresses the intrinsic evil of all attacks on innocent human life, such as any type, and I'm quoting now directly from the compendium, any type of murder, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, or willful suicide. This is the essence of the social teaching Pope Francis and the Catholic Church and its institutions remain firmly committed to and expound upon. Now listen to this. To Catholic physicians, Francis said this: "Be witnesses and diffusers of the culture of life. Your being Catholic entails a greater responsibility, first of all to yourselves, through a commitment consistent with your Christian vocation, and then to contemporary culture by contributing to recognizing the transcendent dimension of human life, the imprint of God's creative work from the first moment of its conception. This is a task of the new evangelization that often requires going against the tide and paying for it personally. The Lord is also counting on you to spread the gospel of life." just a little more than 6 months ago, Pope Francis tied his emphasis on Catholic social teaching, care for the poor and marginalized, the weak and the vulnerable, together with the sanctity of each and every human life when he said this: "Every unborn child, though unjustly condemned to be aborted, has the face of the Lord, who even before his birth, and then as soon as he was born, experienced the rejection of the world." Pope Francis said, "And every old person, even if infirm and at the end of his days, carries with him the face of Christ. They must not be thrown away." And so you see, Pope Francis teaches, believes, promotes, announces, excites, enthralls a whole watching and listening world, not to mention the 24-hour news cycle, with this magnificent body of Catholic truth. And the fact that he made it to the cover of the Rolling Stone and to Time magazine is all the doing of God. Because once they get past the front page and delve deeper and deeper into Pope Francis' teaching, there it is, then they find the joy and the glory and the transformation of that Catholic truth. Pray for our Holy Father, because he has been chosen for such a time as this. God bless you. Thanks.